Do you
It's the
paint?
Paris
A little,
Chong
a little. I
Yeah,
do
Show.
and but
paint a
I
little.
do know that you have a lovely art collection.
I do. I do.
Yeah.
I grew up with art. You know, my mother and my father, they both were artists.
Oh,
So that was really strong influence in my life. My mother was a sculptress, an interior designer. My father was a painter, an illustrator, a graphic designer. He was a true madman on Madison Avenue advertising. He
wow.
was an art director. His work is in a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art,
That
my
is
father's work.
amazing.
So I grew up with a lot of art. They collected a lot of art. I had a lot of art books in the house. It was a tremendous influence. So, as I said to you before, ever since I was 5, I knew I wanted to be a photographer. And I think it was a kind of an innate thing because when I was a little baby, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, my father used to take him underneath his arm to his work sometimes. And his photographer, my father's photographer at the time, was the famed Richard Avedon. He was
Mm.
one of my father's photographers. So I used to see Richard Avedon with a host of other photographers shoot product shots and fashion photography for my father. And I was a young boy.
How did I
Obviously,
not know this?
yes, yes. So I was a young boy, and all I got was the stimuli of all these flash umbrellas going off, beautiful music playing on the sound systems, Polaroids being snapped off all over the floor. And I saw all of that. After the shoots, I used to grab all the Polaroids, put them in my pocket, and go home
Yeah.
and look at the Polaroids. A lot of times I would sniff the Polaroids, if they rubbed it with the fixer, it was
Yeah.
a really beautiful smell. And I have a shoebox filled with Polaroids from that era.
You're kidding. You have Avedon
I
Polaroids?
do. And to be honest with you, maybe 98% of it is destroyed and really, fainted away. Some of them are still there. I know I have some that's worth something, but they are there. So anyway, my point is I grew up with art. My father, when I was a small boy, I think I was 5 at the time, my father gave me a small plastic 2 and a quarter medium format Instamatic camera,
Mhm.
and I used to put the 2 and a quarter film in there, take photographs of my family. I was learning to do family portraits, which I still have from that
Wow.
camera, and I used to develop that film in my parents' bathroom. I learned how to develop
How old were you?
5, 6, 7 years old.
What?
Yes, so I knew I wanted to be a photographer. Then I went to school for photography, and cut to I won a scholarship through my photography. In my
Wow.
last year of education, I changed photography into cinematography. And how that happened was there was a professor that I had. His name was Manfred Kirshheimer. He was a filmmaker as well. And he showed an episode of Twilight Zone to the class.
Mhm.
And we were in a photography class. So that was quite interesting for that alone. Like, why are we seeing in a film when we're in a photography class? But he showed it to us. It was a very famous, very rare episode of Twilight Zone. It was called Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. And it was about the North and the South, Civil War, and they were opposed to each other. It was a war. And the opening shot was the soldier was ready to be hung. He had the noose around his neck.
Yeah.
He was ready to be hung. Cut to, an event happened. He got free. He escaped. And you see this whole film of him escaping and having a life thereafter. And then at the very end of the film, you would come back to that very, very same opening shot of him with the noose around his neck,
Mm.
and he gets hung. So, wow, I got blown away. Oh my God, this story took place in a split second in this man's mind when he was ready to be hung. And that concept of time and to tell that story fascinated me so much that I wanted to change my vocation from photography to cinematography. And when I was studying my photography, I didn't know at the time, but I was in my way telling stories as well because I was a photographer when I was in high school for Newsday
Mhm.
newspaper. And my thing was doing photo essays. I would find a subject and do 4, 5, 6 photographs of that subject to tell a story. So that's what I was doing before I became a cinematographer. I was actually telling stories through my photography. So it was all that influence. It's a long answer, but my parents growing up with art, being appreciated with art, being influenced with tremendous stimuli that was out there, affected my life. It's in my DNA.
It
It's in my
really is.
chromosomes. My father, and my mother. They're both no longer with me right now, but they were truly my mentors.
I know, it
They were
sounds like it,
truly my
and I'm
mentors.
so sorry your mother just
Yeah,
recently passed.
last
I know,
year.
but
Yeah, that was a tough one.
yeah, I'm sorry.
That was Thank you. Thank you.
It's an awful thing to happen. But you are a good son. I know that.
I do my best.
Yeah.
I
Well,
try,
so your
I
parents, so
try.
you had, it was just inbred in you, and it was gonna happen no matter what happened in your life. You were gonna do
I
this.
think
Yeah.
so. I was destined. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the Paris Chong